Hey everyone, we're just getting started here live from the Codecademy studio. Sorry for a little bit of the delay. My name is Ian Freed. I'm a curriculum developer here at Codecademy. We're just going to make sure that everything is looking good here in the studio with the live stream. Yeah, if you guys are able to hear well, able to see me, or run into any issues, feel free to use the chat that we have going on the live stream. Awesome, so we'll just give a little more time to make sure that everything is looking good, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today. We're really excited here to walk you through how to use a lot of the data that Facebook is collecting on all of us to get some interesting insights. So I think it'll be a great session. I've learned a lot about my past Facebook Messenger history, my relations with my friends. It's been a journey and exciting, and I hope all of you guys will get to do the same. Okay, I think everything is sounding good, everything is working well. So let's go ahead and get started. And for anyone who's just joining us once again, my name is Ian Freed. I'm a curriculum developer here at Codecademy, and I work on our data science path team. And we create a lot of the content that you'll see on Codecademy related to data analysis and machine learning. And I've been interested in this area for a little while, and I wanted to see what I could do with the data that Facebook is collecting on us. Facebook has been in the news of late related to all the data that it has, and I knew it was collecting all this data, so I wanted to go ahead and see what I could get from downloading that data and doing an analysis. And so today we'll show you how to download that Facebook data for yourself, and then go ahead and do an analysis on your chat history in Jupyter Notebooks, which is a great data science tool for evaluating code and displaying graphics. You'll learn some stuff about your Facebook friends. So to go ahead and get started, I'm going to move over to Facebook and talk to you a little bit about how we can go ahead and download your data. And anytime throughout the chat, feel free to comment any issues you're running into, any questions that you have. I want to try and make this conversation between me and you all here, not just make it kind of me talking at you. So definitely let me know any questions that arise. So I'm here on my Facebook settings, which you can access by going to your Facebook and just clicking the little arrow on the top right, and then going down to the settings option. And I'll bring you here. And we see this banner right here along the top, really alerting you to how to download your Facebook information. Facebook wants you to know that it has it and that you can access it so you can get a look for yourself. Hopefully you might have done this beforehand. We sent out some instructions to some of you. Others might be joining for the first time, so feel free to follow me right now, and you can go ahead and get that download started on your data. So we'll click your Facebook information right here. And then we can go down to this other section right here that says download your information. We'll click download a copy. And we'll let it load for a second. And Facebook will take you to this page right here. And what this page is showing you is all the information that Facebook is collecting. So as you can see, it's a lot of information. It might be shocking to you, it might not be shocking to you. It was a little bit shocking to me, but they have everything from your posts, your photos and videos, comments, all your friends, your messages. This is what we'll be looking at today. Information about advertisers and how they're looking at your profile, what information they're getting. Your location history, calls. It's pretty crazy. So once I saw this, I was like, okay, I need to do something with this myself rather than just having Facebook using it for their maybe machine learning models or for advertisers. And to go ahead and get this data, what we're going to do is we're going to adjust some of the options. And so I won't be able to do it on my page right now since I already have a request that got sent in. But on your page, what you'll want to do is go ahead and leave this date range to all of my data. That is going to go ahead and just get all your data going back into your past. We'll change this format right here. It's highlighted as an HTML, but if you were to click on that little box right there, you'll see the option for JSON. And JSON is another format of data that is more easy for us to analyze. And so just change that option to JSON. And then lastly, you can go over to the media quality and change the media quality to low. This will make sure that when you're downloading that information, any sort of photos that have been in your chat history, they'll get downloaded at the lowest resolution. Otherwise, that file that you're requesting could be really, really, really big. And for our analysis, we're not going to be needing any of the photos or anything like that. Once you've made those selections, you'll want to go ahead and click this Deselect All button right here on the top. This will make sure that we're not downloading every single piece of information Facebook has on us. That's going to be a huge, huge, huge file. It'll take a long time to download, and maybe you want that, so you can do that for yourself. But I would recommend, at least for this analysis, to just deselect all by clicking right over there on the top right, and then scrolling down to Messages. And you'll just click that Messages checkbox, and that will make sure that we're just getting the message history data. Once all of the settings are configured, you'll click Create File right here on the top right. And then you'll get an email and notification from Facebook when that file is ready for you to access. And it'll be available here in the Available Files section. It might take a day or two for you. It might be really quick. I think it depends on how many requests Facebook is getting, how busy their servers are. It's a little bit of a mystery. So you can go ahead and get that download started right now. If you don't have it already, it's totally fine. We have some sample data that you can use to follow along with us today. And you can access that sample data by going to the bottom of the stream and the description area. We have a link to that sample data. It's going to be in a zipped JSON file, so you can just go ahead right now and click on that link, download the zip file, and unzip. So just checking quickly to see if anyone has any questions. Seems like everyone's doing well. Yes, Facebook can be scary. I agree. But you know, it's a necessary evil maybe in our lives. I think a lot of us use it. So cool. Okay. So once you've gone ahead and submitted that request for your data, let me show you what that might look like on your computer. I'm going to show you right here. When you download your Facebook data, you're going to get this folder that will say Messages. And so I'm going to zoom in maybe a little right here so everyone can see potentially, if I can. Okay, not able to zoom, but you'll see right here we have this Messages folder, and that's going to contain every single conversation that you have ever had on Facebook. So it doesn't matter if it's your best friend who you're talking to last week, or it was that person you spoke to one time back in middle school. You will have every single conversation that you've ever had in this Messages folder. So I say beware which messages you go into. You might find things that you don't want to remember. I would stick to maybe some friends who you've known for a really long time. You have a lot of messages with each other, and you'll be able to find out some interesting information there. And inside that Messages folder, there will be a different folder for every single conversation that you've had, all those different friends' conversations. And inside of that folder, we have this message.json file. That message file is going to actually contain all the information for those messages that we've downloaded. So that's the key file that we're going to be using today for our analysis. And so once again, don't worry if you don't have your own data downloaded. You can use that sample data that we have provided in the description of the live stream. Okay, so we have this data that we've downloaded from Facebook. Let's go ahead, start taking a peek at what we have inside and figuring out what we can find out. For this analysis, we're going to be using a tool called Jupyter Notebook. And Jupyter Notebook is a really useful tool that is used by data scientists, a lot of people in the data analysis industry, to look at data, do a lot of exploration with it to see what's there, and then also do their analysis. And so to access Jupyter, hopefully on your computer you have downloaded Anaconda. Anaconda is this great toolkit for data scientists that has Python included for you, a lot of the great packages that are used for data analysis, and it should also download Jupyter notebooks for you. And so if you just open up your terminal on your computer, you can just go ahead and type in Jupyter Notebook, just like this. And it's going to go ahead and open up on your computer the Jupyter Notebook interface. And it's basically going to show through your web browser just all the files that you have on your computer. And you can navigate through these different folders to wherever you want to create this file for analysis. So I'd recommend creating this notebook in the same location where you download that messages JSON file from Facebook. And then once you're in the right location, all you need to do to create a new file is go up to New here on the top right and click Python 3. And that's going to open up a new Python 3 notebook for you in Jupyter. And so I'm just going to navigate back to my notebook over here, just because I created this one in the right folder for where I'm going to be doing my analysis. So we're here in Jupyter Notebooks, and let's get started with looking at this data. So what I'm going to do first is go back to my Finder, and I'm going to find that file that is the message.json file. Because we need that location of where that file is on your computer in order for us to open it up. So I'm just going to right-click, double-click, whatever it is on your computer, depending if you're Mac or Windows, and click Get Info on the message.json file. And I'm going to go to the location, which is listed over here in this information page, right-click on that location, and click Copy. And what that's going to do is just get that copy for me, that location for me. And I'm just going to go back to my Jupyter Notebook, and I'm going to create a variable called path to file. And I'm going to put in a string that is this location that I've copied. And at the end, this is just the file location where that file is. But I want to point directly to the specific message.json file. So I'm going to add in right at the end a slash and then message.json. And when you're in Jupyter Notebooks, to run a certain cell, you can just click Shift and Return, or Shift and Enter, and that will execute that single line of code. And this is one of the great things about Jupyter. It lets you run blocks of code or lines of code one at a time. And so just looking here at the chat, if you're having some issues finding the file, I would say try downloading once again that message.json file from the YouTube description. You should be able to, in your, I believe in Windows it's like Explorer, and Mac it's Finder, find where that file is, and then copy the location from there. Okay, now that we have our location from of the file, let's go ahead and open it up. So I'm going to say with open, and then I am going to put inside the open the path to file, and I'm going to call this as file right here. I'm going to do a colon. And then I'm going to store the contents of this JSON file in a variable called chat history. And to load this file in, I'm going to write json.load my file. And right here, when you run this, you might run into an error when typing in json.load. If you are seeing that error, I'm going to say that you should also import JSON right here on top. This is just importing a Python package for working with JSON data. So we'll import that. We'll open up the file with this syntax. I'll click Shift-Enter. And this has now opened that file and pulled all the contents out into chat history. And we can take a look at chat history right here. And in Jupyter Notebooks, to just look at a variable, you don't need to print it out. You can just run that individual variable, just run that cell. And you can see here we have chat history, which is this Python dictionary. And I'll try and zoom in a little here so you guys can see more. And hopefully that will help. Okay, great. We got some zoom, a little bit of lag. But now you guys should be able to see the information displayed a little more clearly. So in order for us to get a better idea of all of this data that's in here, I'm going to go ahead and look at the keys of the dictionary. So I'm going to say chat history .keys. And I can see that we have a few different keys here. One is participants, another is messages. So the participants are going to be the people who are involved in this chat. And so we can look here up on the top. For participants, we have Lewis Carroll and we have Jane Austen. Originally, I had done a lot of analysis on my own Facebook Messenger data, and I was horrified by some of the things that I saw. So I thought best to use some other information for this live chat. So we grabbed some text from Project Gutenberg, which is a open source natural language processing novel database, and grabbed text from two famous authors, Lewis Carroll and Jane Austen, and we replaced my actual message history with information or text from their novels. So just mixing it up a little bit here, but everything is exactly in the same format as it should be downloaded from Facebook. So no need to worry there. Let's go ahead and take a look at a little bit more what we have here. So we have these two participants, Lewis Carroll and Jane Austen. But then we also have, we see messages, and then we see these blocks of messages. So we see the sender is Jane, then we have a timestamp, which is a timestamp in milliseconds of when that message was sent. We also see we have content here, which is the actual message content that was sent by that individual. And we also have other information here, like photos, which will have other things. If you sent a picture, if you made a phone call, that will also be listed there. That will all be listed. And I'm just taking a look at the chat here. Can you scroll back up and show with the open command? Of course. Sorry about that. So I'll scroll back up here. And we can see right here, import JSON to make sure that we have that JSON package. And then with open path to file, as file, and we're going to load that JSON file into chat history with json.load of file. I apologize for missing on that, Sam and Chris. Hopefully you guys are able to now see how to get that file loaded. Okay, so we can see that we have a lot of good information here. Everything that we want is really stored inside the messages key of this dictionary. So I'm going to just go to chat history once again, and then type in the key of messages. We'll let it run for a second, and this is the information that we really want. So how do we go ahead and take this list of basically messages that we have here and convert it into something that is useful for us. How can we visualize this data in a useful way? In order to do this, we're going to use the Python package pandas. And pandas is really good for data visualization, helping us organize our data, do data cleaning, and ultimately managing our data within Python. So I'm going to import the pandas package right here. And then I'm going to create what's called a data frame in pandas. And a data frame is the main way that we store large amounts of data in pandas. So I'm going to name this data frame messages. And I'm going to set it equal to a value that's going to be the data frame of our data. And now when we're using pandas, we usually have this shorthand notation for PD. So instead of just regularly importing pandas, I'm going to import it as PD. And now I'm going to set messages to pd.dataframe of that entire list of messages. So I'll say chat history. Of messages. And I'll run that, and now we can take a look at messages right here. And we see that we get this data frame. And on the top, we have these different columns. These columns represent the different aspects of an individual message. So we have the content column, which is showing the actual content of that specific message. We have the sender name, which is the name of the person who sent that message. We have some other interesting things like any GIFs that were posted, if there was like a call associated with that message, how long it lasted. We have, importantly, the timestamp in milliseconds, and this is the actual time that that message was sent. And so those columns represent those different attributes of a message. And then each row here is representing a different message that we have. So 0 is representing one message from Jane Austen that started, "The family of Dashwood had long been settled." The second message, 1, was by Lewis Carroll, and it starts "Down the rabbit hole." So we can see we have all this information here. And okay, I'm seeing some questions. So someone asked about line 1. So line 1 at the top is just going to be the path to that specific file on your computer. And this is the message.json file that has all your message information. We also have a question about what does NaN mean? So NaN stands for not a number. And whenever there's missing information for a specific column, for a certain message, we'll list NaN automatically. So for message 0 right here, there was no call duration, so it was just a text message. There were no GIFs. There were no reactions used. Those are those little reactions you can send to individual Facebook messages. And so if something's missing, we'll say NaN. If we have data there, we will be able to see the actual piece of content there. Okay, awesome. So we have this big data frame of all of our data. Now is a good question, or time to ask the question, what are we going to do with this data? What sort of insights can we find? And so when I was looking at this, I saw that we have all of this message content. What can I do with that message content? And one thing that's really popular to do with text data is to do what's called a sentiment analysis. And a sentiment analysis is essentially looking at different text data and assigning a positive or negative score to a piece of text to see if it is positive or negative. Was this something that was happy or joyful or positive, or is this something that was maybe sad or a negative or unhappy? And by looking at the sentiment of, let's say, these messages over time, we're able to see how the nature of your Facebook chat has changed with your friend. So maybe you guys started off, in the beginning of your friendship having really positive messages, Maybe you guys hit some rough spots and the sentiment of those messages start to go down. Maybe you got into a fight, the sentiment went really down. Or we can also even look at sentiment between each specific person in the conversation. So maybe in your conversations with your friend, your messages are really positive, you're that upbeat person, you're always trying to help your friend out, get them in a good mood, or maybe you're the kind of person who you've been down on your luck, things have been tough, and maybe the sentiment of your messages will indicate that. So what I wanted to do was look at the sentiment of these messages, these Facebook messages over time, and see what I'm able to find. So that's kind of where this analysis is going to go. You can see that we have a lot of other data. You could go so many different ways with this. But for today, we're going to stick with the sentiment analysis. And since I wanted to do an analysis over time, I wanted to take advantage of this time data that we have. And so we can see that we have the timestamp in milliseconds. This doesn't mean a lot to us. This is the amount of time since some specific time when Facebook starts recording dates. I believe for lots of computer systems, they track from January 1st, 1970, and they count up from there. Different systems use different timestamps. So what we're going to do is go ahead and, using pandas, which is great once again for data manipulation, convert this timestamp from milliseconds into something useful. And so to go ahead and do that, I'm going to create some helper functions. So I'm going to create a function called convertTime, and it's going to take in a timestamp. And what we're going to do is we're going to return that timestamp converted into what is called a pandas datetime, and it's a specific pandas data type that will give us the month, the day, the year, and the hour of a specific message. And so to do that, we're going to call pandas and use its toDateTime method, and I'm just going to feed it that timestamp. And I could go ahead and just save this function or define it right now. But one thing that you would run into if you just normally saved it is this function would not work properly. And that's because we need to make a note of the timestamp, which is specifically in milliseconds. So we need to add that unit in to our datetime function. So there is a keyword argument that we can add called unit. And I'm just going to set the unit to milliseconds. So I've created this function. Let's try it out. I'm just going to copy this timestamp right here from this one message. Ooh, if my computer will let me copy it. And I'm going to call convertTime on this timestamp. And awesome. Now we can see here that this message was from October 5th, 2018 at the 22nd hour at 10:30. So really useful tool to able to make those timestamps into something that's useful to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and apply this convertTime function that we just made here to every single message in our messages data frame. So it's going to convert all these timestamps from milliseconds into datetime. And we can do this by saying messages, and we want to operate on the, so we're going to operate on this timestamp milliseconds column, but I want to create a new column. So I'm going to make a new column called date, and I'm going to set it equal to applying this function, convertTime, to every single timestamp that we have. So I'm going to say messages of timestamp in milliseconds, and we're going to use pandas.apply. And what apply will do is apply this convertTime function that I have to every single message, or to every single timestamp for every single message. So I'm going to run that, and I'll show my data frame again. And if I scroll over to the right on my data frame, we'll now see that we have this new column called date, which has that converted timestamp. So our most recent message is going to be from October 6, 2018. And if we scroll down all the way to the bottom, and I didn't show this before, but I believe we have 60 How many? 600, almost 6,700 messages between Jane and Lewis. So they're pretty good friends. You might find that for some of your friendships, you have fewer messages. If it's maybe your best friend, you might find that you have 100,000 messages. That might depend, how the size of the file will change depending on that. So things might run slower if you have a lot of messages. Just things to look out for. But you'll see here our earliest message is from August 29th, 2017. So they've been friends for a little over a year at this point, a year and 3 or 4 months. Great. So we were able to pull out this date, and I just want to make sure no one has any questions yet. I see some of my colleagues are being really helpful. Thank you guys for answering some questions too. And great, okay, so we have this date time, but we also want to pull out the specific month and year of that date time. Because when I'm doing the sentiment analysis, I want to see on a month-by-month basis how sentiment is changing. We can look at individual messages and compare the sentiments, but we're going to have 800, 6,700 messages at that point. If we shrink our space down to the, let's say, the 15 months that Jane and Lewis have been talking, we can do like an aggregate analysis and see how that sentiment is changing over time. So now I want to go ahead and pull out that month and year. And thankfully this is really easy with Pandas datetime objects. So I'm going to create 2 more helper functions right now, one called getMonth, and it's going to take in a Pandas datetime. And we're just going to return the date with a period and then the month. That's it. So if you have that Pandas datetime object, you just add a period after and then month, and you'll get the month. I'm going to add another function called getYear, which will also take a datetime object, and we can return date dot year. And just like I did before, I'm going to create 2 new columns in my data frame. One will be called, I'll start with month, and the other will be called year. And I'm going to operate this time on the date column of messages. So if I just put date in the brackets of messages, we're able to access that date column. And we're going to use the apply method once again, and we'll apply our getMonth function that we just defined. And I'm going to do the same thing for year. So I'll say messages of year, creating this new messages column. And we're going to operate on the date column. And we will apply our getYear function. And if you're following along and you're familiar with Python and using Pandas, that's great. If you're newer to Python or you haven't used it before, don't worry. This video is being recorded. It'll be saved. You'll be able to access it later on. And if there's any sort of syntax that you're not getting, you'll be able to review and hopefully learn some of the syntax during that review time. So yeah, don't get stressed. Just feel free to follow along for now and see what insights you're able to find. Great. Let's go ahead and just inspect our messages data frame one more time. And we'll be able to see those 2 new columns that we added right here on the right that have month and year. So we've gone ahead and done a little bit of cleaning on the data that we downloaded from Facebook. Now I want to go ahead and get started on doing that actual sentiment analysis. How do we see the content that we have and see the score or the sentiment of it? And to do our sentiment analysis, we're going to be using a package called NLTK, which is the Natural Language Toolkit. This is a really useful Python package for natural language processing. So if you're interested in text data, what insights we can find with it, I highly recommend looking into NLTK. And with NLTK, we're going to use a specific tool called Vader. And Vader is a sentiment analysis tool, which is going to do the sentiment analysis for us. So I'm going to say from nltk.sentiment.vader, so this is a specific part of NLTK, we're going to import sentiment intensity analyzer. And so we'll go ahead and import that. If on your computer you don't have NLTK installed, or let's say you run this cell and you see an error pop up, you could just go back to your terminal, and I would open up a new window that's not Jupyter. And if you have Anaconda installed, you could just do conda install NLTK. If you don't have conda and you're using pip, you could do pip install NLTK, and that should download that package for you. One last thing that we want to do with NLTK is we need to download the lexicon for Vader. And this is essentially a giant dictionary of words that are scored with positive or negative scores. And this is what Vader will use in order to look at our text data and assign these scores to our messages. So I'm going to say nltk.download, and in a string I'm going to say Vader underscore lexicon. And when you run the cell, it might take some time. For me, I've already downloaded it to my computer, so it runs really quickly. But for you, it might take some time to download. Once that's downloaded, let's go ahead and create a sentiment analyzer object. So I'm going to say sentiment analyzer is equal to, and I'm going to say sentiment intensity analyzer. With bracket at the end, don't forget the parentheses, that'll just create that sentiment analysis object for us. And let's go ahead and test this out on some data. So I'm just going to ask if someone can type in maybe a sentence that you want me to run a quick sentiment analysis on. So just enter it into the chat, and I will try out our sentiment intensity analyzer on your sentence. If no one puts anything in, I'll use one of your comments maybe, and we can give it a shot. So in order to do this, I'm going to say sentiment analyzer dot polarity scores. And polarity scores is this method that will score a sentence for us. And I see someone saying, that's sweet. So I'm going to say, that's sweet. And so I put that sentence into my analyzer. And we can see we get this dictionary of scores back. And so the first is a negative score, a neutral score, then a positive score, and a compound score. And so I think when whoever you are, when you said that's sweet, you meant that in a great way. You seemed pretty positive, and Vader seems to agree. It's giving a positive score of 0.75 and a compound or an overall score of 0.5, which is pretty positive. And so those three scores, negative, neutral, positive, those will range from 0 to 1. And the compound score will range from -1, meaning most negative, to 1, meaning most positive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try this one more time on a few more sentences really quickly. So if we run the polarity scores on the machines will take over, we can see what Vader says. Okay, Vader is saying the machines will take over is a neutral statement. I don't know if I would agree with that. I'm a little worried about the machines taking over. It's not the best thing to me. Then again, Vader is part of a computer, I guess. So maybe it's not the best to ask for this kind of sentence. So it's not perfect at everything. If there's clear positive or negative words in your sentence, Vader will work pretty well. Other times it doesn't. And I saw that someone's asking about natural language processing in foreign languages. So yeah, I believe Vader only works in English at this time. However, there are some natural language processing tools out there that are being trained on different languages. So people are doing it. I think there's a lot of unexplored territory there. I think there hopefully will be a lot more research done there. But yeah, at this time, looks like Vader is just in English. Great. Okay, so now that we have this, let's create a helper function that will score each of our messages for us. So I'm going to say, define a function called getPolarity, and it's going to take in a piece of text, and it's going to return our sentiment analyzer, and we're going to use its polarity scores function. And we're going to pass it our text data. And what we're going to do is we're just going to, access our compound score. So I'm just going to access the compound key in that dictionary. Compound. Great. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a new column in messages called sentiment. And I'm going to set it equal to applying this getPolarity function to our message content column. So I'm going to say messages, and I'm going to go back just to make sure what the name of that column is. If I scroll up, I can see it's called content. So content is the name of our column that has that actual text data. So I'm going to say messages of content. And we're going to apply our getPolarity function. And I will run this. This might take a little bit of time depending on how many messages you have. It's just a little bit more intensive analysis than the date conversion we were doing before. And then if we look at messages once again, and I scroll over to the right, we're able to see these different sentiment scores. So for these first two sentences, Vader is saying, 0 sentiment, meaning basically neutral. But this one, 0.8419, a really positive message from Jane. So let's see, Jane was saying their estate was large and their residence was probably something grand or great. So really hyping up this residence or this estate. So very positive. So now we have all these sentiment scores. We see a negative 0.15 here, negative 0.59, pretty negative. Let's take a look at this one really quickly. Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting. So yes, Alice was getting bored. She was tired. She wanted to do something. She was getting antsy. So more negative. So hopefully everyone was able to follow along with the sample data to get to this point where we have sentiment. We're getting to the really cool part soon, or right now really, where we get to see some results, see some insights from our data. So to get these insights, first really quickly, let's get an idea of who is the more positive and more negative person in this conversation. Is it Jane or is it Louis? And so in order to do this, we're going to use our messages data frame. And I'm going to use the group by method. And what this will do is it will group all the rows in our data frame that are in the same, have the same whatever attribute I choose. So I'm going to say group by sender name. And what this will do is take all of the rows where the sender is Jane Austen, or all of the rows where the sender is Lewis Carroll, and squish them together. And then we can go ahead and apply some sort of aggregate function to all of that content. So let me write it out, and I think it will be a little easier to explain. So I'm going to say group by sender name, and I'm going to take the mean. I'm just going to run this really quickly. And so what this was doing was taking all the messages that Jane sent and finding the mean, or the average, of each of these different columns here. So we can see, if we look at the average sentiment, we see 0.16. So of all the messages that Jane sent, her average overall sentiment was 0.16. We go down to Louis, we can see the average overall sentiment was 0.05. So what this is showing to us is that Jane is almost 3 times as positive in her messages as Louis overall. So it's some pretty interesting finding there. I'm not a, haven't read a lot of Jane's works, so I'm not as familiar, but very surprising to me, at least from my understanding of these two authors. So hopefully you're getting some interesting insights on your data if you're following along with your own. If not, hopefully in the future when you're able to do on your data, you automatically get some really interesting insights right from here. Now that we have this, though, let's go ahead and see if we can make our visualization over time and see how that sentiment is changing. So once again, I'm going to take messages, and I'm going to group by, and this time, instead of just grouping by sender name, I'm going to group by 3 different columns. I'm going to group by month, I'm going to group by year, and I'm going to group by sender name. And what this will allow me to do is it will allow me to grab each combined unit of month, year, and sender. So let's say for August 2018, Jane Austen, it's going to gather all of her messages from that month, August 2018, and then we can do that averaging of sentiment on all of those messages. So once again, I'm grouping by those 3 columns, month, year, and sender name, and then I'm going to take the mean. And this time I'm going to save this to a variable, and I'm going to call this year, month, since I'm grouping by year and month. And then one last thing I'm going to do and tack onto the end is one more pandas method, reset index. And what this will do is it will reformat this information into a data frame once again, so we're able to do some further analysis on it. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And I'm going to now display year, month, and we can take a look at this. And so what we can now see in this data frame is we have, for January 2018, we have Jane Austen, and we have her average sentiment as 0.17. For the same month, January 2018, we have Lewis Carroll, and then we have her average sentiment as 0.05. And this continues for every single month of the year. Grouping in pandas is a really, really powerful tool. It helps us do a lot of interesting things. It can be a little complicated at first when you haven't done it before, but once again, you'll have access to this recording later on. We'll also provide the code to you, and you can look at it a little bit deeper. But ultimately, we're just saying, let's look at each month over the course of their friendship and get that average sentiment for each of the different people in that chat. So now that I have this new data frame, I want to go ahead and grab all of those average sentiments over time for each sender, for each person in this chat. Because once I grab all that data, I can go ahead and then plot that over time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new variable, Jane. And this is going to store all of the sentiment values for Jane. And I'm going to use that year, month data frame that I created earlier, or just before. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get all of the rows, or all of the messages that belong to Jane. And the way we can do this is with what's called Boolean indexing. And basically, it just lets us select all those rows in this data frame where Jane is the sender. So I'll type out how we do this here, and then explain to you. So we're going to say year, month of sender name, and we want it to be equal to Jane Austen. So what this is doing is it's saying, go to every single row, look at the sender name. If the sender name is Jane Austen, give me that whole row. Give me that information. But specifically, I'm really just interested in the sentiment. I don't care about the timestamp. I don't care about the call duration. I just want that sentiment. So I'm going to then just access that sentiment by using the bracket notation and then sentiment. And one last thing I'm just going to tack on to the end, just because I want the raw data. I don't want it in some pandas object. I just want the raw values. I'm just going to say dot values right here. And let me zoom out a little bit just so you're able to see this whole line of code all together. I think that'll be really useful for you. We'll take a second to resize. Great. And now I will run this line of code, and if I look at Jane, we now see that Jane is just this array of sentiments. And so this first value, 0.17, is Jane's first sentiment from the first month that we have in record. 0.153 is her sentiment on average for the second month. And then 0.14 here at the end is her sentiment for the last month. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing now for Lewis. I'm going to say Lewis is equal to, and I'm going to just grab only the rows from our data frame where the sender name is equal to Lewis Carroll. And once again, we're just going to grab those sentiment scores from there, and we're just going to grab the values. And let's see, I'm running into an error. Series object has no attribute value. So let's see where I made, so I just wrote value instead of values. So we'll go ahead and update that. And now we have that, and I can run this cell below, and now we have all the sentiment scores for Lewis over time from the beginning of their Facebook friendship to the end. Now that we have the values, we can finally get to our graphing. And this will allow us to visualize how these sentiments between the two have changed over time. So to do this, we're going to import matplotlib. Matplotlib is the plotting package from Python. So in order to import that, we'll say import matplotlib.pyplot as PLT. PLT is just that shorthand notation we'll be using to access matplotlib. And to go ahead and do a plot, all we have to do is type in plt.plot, and I can just put in Jane. And then below that, I can just say plt.plot and just put in Lewis. And before I run this, I want to make sure that this plot is big, that we can all see it. So I'm going to say plt.figure. And this just lets me access the figure size that we're going to be making these plots on. And I'll say fig size is equal to, and I just give it a width by height. So I'm going to say 20 by 10. I want it to be longer than it is in terms of height. So I'll go ahead and run this. And there we go. Now we have our graph of sentiment over time. Really cool, but you're asking, okay, who is who? Which one is Jane? Which one is Lewis? Which one is me? Which one is my friend? So we can quickly go back to our previous cell, and we can just add in a label, which is going to be Jane for Jane, and then for Lewis, the label is going to be Lewis. And then just below this, I'm going to use Matplotlib's legend tool, which will add a legend to our plot and show us which line belongs to which sender. So here we go. We have our final product. We have this plot over time for sentiment of Jane and Lewis. We can see that their friendship starts out at kind of a mid-level of sentiment. You know, they're just getting to know each other, perhaps. We then see a few months into the friendship, there's this divergence. Jane gets really positive in her sentiment. Lewis goes down in her sentiment. We can guess about why this happens. Maybe Lewis was going through some rough things in life, and Jane was trying to cheer up her friend. This is the part of the analysis where things get interesting on your end. When you're looking at your Facebook message history, you get to add that context to the data. And this is one of those things that's important in data science overall, is having kind of a domain knowledge or like an understanding of the data that you're working with. And you're able to provide that for your Facebook message data. So even though Facebook has it, they don't know what's going on in your life outside besides what's happening on Facebook, but you have all that other knowledge to put that data in context. So if you're looking at your sentiment over time and you're seeing things happen, you're able to infer, oh yeah, like this was when I was going through a breakup, or this was a really great time in life, I just got this great promotion. and having that context really adds another dimension to your analysis. So I urge you to have that mindset when you go into analyzing your sentiment. But you should be able to get a graph like this showing how that sentiment changes over time. And I think you'll find a lot of interesting insights. I've really enjoyed doing this with my data, and I think you guys will have a lot of fun too. So I hope you're able to follow along with us as we went through this process. I know some of you might run into issues here and there, but once again, this video will be up for you to review, and as will the code. We're really eager to see what you guys are able to do with your data in plotting out your sentiment or finding even other things hidden in the data. If you do any of this analysis on your own, we'd love to see it. So feel free to tweet at us. We're at Codecademy on Twitter. Send us the sentiment analysis that you do. Let us know the insights that you find. I think it will be a lot of fun that you guys will enjoy. I know I enjoyed going through my data, even if at times it did get scary. I will warn you, your past can be scary, but enlightening too. So thank you guys all for joining. I hope you enjoyed. Get out there, take advantage of all the data that you can find, learn some new things. Once again, if you're interested in kind of digging into data science a little bit further, we have a lot of options here at Codecademy. Happy to help you learn some more. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.